We are confident that the domestic pressure from senators, governors, business leaders, union leaders in the United States will also create potentially an opportunity for us to come to an agreement with the American administration.
Canada's Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc has just delivered a message that cuts through the noise of tariffs, counter-tariffs, and political maneuvering. He declared that he is confident trade deals with the United States can still be reached. At first glance, it may sound optimistic, even overly so, given the hostile environment. But in truth, the statement is more than optimism. It is a sign that Canada sees leverage in a situation many assumed was stacked against it. This declaration comes at a time when Washington has unleashed some of the most aggressive trade measures in recent history. Under President Donald Trump's second term, tariffs have been applied broadly, with rates ranging from 10 to 50% on major partners. Canada has been hit particularly hard. Lumber, steel, aluminum, cabinets, and furniture are all facing steep duties as goods cross the border. These measures were supposed to pull jobs back to Detroit, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and showcase Trump as the dealmaker who could force allies to bend. Instead, they have set in motion forces that now threaten to undermine that very strategy.
Canada would not do what Japan, the EU, and others have done and settle for an across-the-board tariff from the U.S. in exchange for dropping sectoral tariffs leveled on softwood, steel, and aluminum.
When LeBlanc insisted Canada still has leverage, it was not bluster. His reasoning rests on the political and economic pain these tariffs are causing inside the United States. Governors, senators, business leaders, and union representatives are pressing the White House because they see the costs firsthand. Higher raw material prices are squeezing construction companies. Furniture makers in the Midwest are losing access to affordable inputs. Steel and aluminum duties are pushing up prices for auto parts and machinery. These ripple effects have made the tariffs a live issue in state capitals and in Congress. Ottawa has taken calculated steps in this environment. It rolled back many of its retaliatory tariffs to demonstrate a willingness to find common ground. Yet at the same time, Canada refused to strike a deal that mirrors what Japan or the European Union accepted. Those partners agreed to across-the-board tariff ceilings in exchange for relief on targeted products. Canada has drawn a different line. It insists that sector-specific duties on lumber, steel, and aluminum must be addressed directly.
And LeBlanc rejected the idea that protecting supply management, that's the system that shields dairy and poultry farmers in Canada from U.S. and foreign competition.
On top of this, Canada has stood firm in defending its supply management system. This policy, which shields dairy and poultry farmers from foreign competition, is described by the government as a cornerstone of food security and economic stability. LeBlanc's position is that it is non-negotiable. That message resonates domestically because it connects trade strategy to everyday life. Milk, cheese, and eggs are not abstract commodities. They are the products on kitchen tables across the country. Critics inside Canada have accused the government of weakness. Opposition leaders argue that promises of quick relief from tariffs have not been delivered. But when examined closely, Ottawa's stance is not weakness. It is a strategy of patience, relying on American domestic politics to do part of the work. The central irony of this trade conflict is that measures meant to squeeze Canada are now bouncing back on the United States. Consider the construction sector. Lumber tariffs of 10% layered on top of existing softwood duties are making homes more expensive to build. That matters in states where housing shortages are already severe. The furniture and cabinet tariffs, set to reach 25%, are another example. These costs are passed on to American consumers who already face higher living expenses. Retailers and importers are voicing frustration, and union leaders warn that prolonged tariffs could actually cost American jobs rather than save them. The auto industry illustrates the same pattern. Duties on Canadian steel and aluminum raise the price of components that U.S. factories rely on. Michigan and Ohio, states central to Trump's political coalition, are especially vulnerable. companies are lobbying intensely, reminding policymakers that jobs depend on competitive supply chains, not just on national slogans. This is the first layer of backfire. Tariffs designed to force Canada to concede are fueling dissatisfaction at home. Senators and governors hear the complaints from businesses and workers in their districts. The White House may frame tariffs as a patriotic shield, but the daily reality of higher costs and delayed projects tells a different story. For Trump, the political stakes are high. He has built much of his image on being a master negotiator. Yet, if his strategy results in visible pain for American industries, his ability to claim victory weakens. The harder he pushes Canada, the more resistance builds inside his own borders. Beyond the short-term clash over tariffs lies a deeper shift. LeBlanc has said clearly that Canada's trade relationship with the United States will never return to what it once was. The days of assuming stability, of believing the rules of the Mulroney-Reagan or Clinton-Chrétien era still applied, are gone. This is not just rhetoric. It reflects a deliberate strategy to prepare Canada for a different future. LeBlanc describes this moment as a hinge, a turning point. Canada is using the pressure to accelerate diversification. By working with provinces, industries, and labor groups, the government is steering companies toward new partners. Europe has already signed on to a framework with the United States that caps tariffs, but Canada is looking to Europe for markets, not for concessions. Ottawa is also expanding ties with Indonesia, the United Kingdom, and Mexico. These relationships do not replace the American market overnight, but they gradually lessen dependence. The result is what LeBlanc calls a virtuous circle. The more Canadian businesses find success abroad, the less they are trapped by U.S. tariffs. With less dependency, Canada can negotiate with Washington on more balanced terms. And as that balance improves, it reinforces the incentive to diversify further. This is the second major backfire. Instead of tightening control over Canada, Trump's strategy has pushed his northern neighbor into building resilience. What was once a one-sided dependency is evolving into a network of options. The United States will remain Canada's largest trading partner, but no longer its only indispensable one. Dominic LeBlanc's confidence is not a promise of easy victories. It is an acknowledgement that Canada can endure and even adapt under pressure. The tariffs meant to isolate and weaken have instead opened paths for resilience. Trump's policies are producing two clear reversals. First, they are creating internal backlash in the United States, where businesses, unions, and local leaders are shouldering the costs. Second, they are pushing Canada to diversify, turning what was once a weakness into a strategic strength. The relationship between Canada and the United States has indeed changed forever. Tariffs are no longer just a negotiating tactic. They have become a catalyst for restructuring how two economies interact. Trump wanted to make America less dependent on foreign partners, but in the process, he has made Canada less dependent on America. That is why LeBlanc can speak with confidence. The path forward is not about restoring an old status quo. It is about shaping a new reality, where Canada negotiates from a firmer footing and where the United States must reckon with the unintended consequences of its own policies. The backfire is clear, and the lessons will echo in every round of trade talks to come.
When it comes to trade relations, the future of the North American economy is at stake.
I am optimistic about the future because I look at the past.
Canadians staying home, that's their business. If you want to ban American alcohol, that's fine. There are reasons why the president and some of his team refer to Canada as being mean and nasty to deal with.
When the American ambassador lashes out at Canada, does it reveal U.S. frustration or Canadian resilience? That question surfaced after Pete Hoekstra, speaking in Halifax, dismissed Ottawa's Elbows Up campaign as anti-American. His criticism was meant as a warning, yet many Canadians interpreted it as proof that their pushback is being felt in Washington. Far from backing down, people across the country felt encouraged to stand taller, to buy Canadian goods, and to view the dispute as a chance to show unity. What was framed as an insult ended up reinforcing confidence that Canada's defensive stance is not only necessary, but effective.
The spark for this moment lies in Washington's tariff strategy. Under President Trump's second term, reciprocal tariffs have been rolled out aggressively. In March 2025, the White House imposed a 25% duty on imported cars and auto parts under Section 232. By July, a 50% tariff on copper was added, alongside restrictions on high-grade scrap copper. Steel and aluminum remain under heavy duties as well. The Department of Commerce itself confirmed that these sectoral tariffs are designed to expand beyond metals, and Canadian producers have been bracing for the next wave. What this has created is not compliance, but uncertainty. Business leaders in both countries point to the same reality. Investments stall when duties appear and disappear at a president's discretion. For Canadians, the lesson is clear. Trump's strategy has not weakened their resolve. Instead, it has driven consumers to buy Canadian, reinforced a culture of resilience, and made clear that reliance on American goodwill is a risk too great to ignore.
The Prime Minister kicked it off by traveling to Mexico last week for a summit without America. Mark Carney and his Mexican counterpart, Claudia Sheinbaum, signed an agreement aimed at deepening trade and investment between the two countries.
That realization explains why Prime Minister Mark Carney moved quickly to deepen ties with Mexico. Just days before Halifax, Carney met President Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico City and signed a bilateral agreement on trade and investment. This was no symbolic gesture. It was the first step in repositioning Canada inside North America's supply chain ahead of the 2026 review of the Trade Pact. By linking arms with Mexico, Canada shows that it can look beyond Washington. The Trudeau years often left Canada reacting to U.S. policy, but Carney is signaling a different path. Mexico offers a growing market for Canadian agriculture, energy, and manufacturing inputs. More importantly, this partnership sends a message to Washington that Ottawa is not negotiating alone. It also reassures Canadian businesses that the government is actively seeking stability. For farmers worried about canola exports or for auto suppliers nervous about new tariffs, the Mexico deal represents a lifeline. It does not erase the challenges of U.S. duties, but it creates an environment where Canadian producers can plan with greater confidence, knowing alternative channels are being built. Canada is searching out options in Europe, in Asia, and even cautiously in China, but Mexico is the most immediate and powerful lever. It transforms American pressure into an opportunity to rewire continental trade flows.
The review of the USMCA, or CUSMA in Canada, will not erase the agreement. Few expect it to disappear. What is far more likely is a tightening of rules of origin, making it harder for Canadian products to qualify for duty-free access. That prospect is serious, yet it does not erase the shift we are witnessing now. American frustration, voiced bluntly in Halifax, has not intimidated Canadians. Instead, it has accelerated their search for partners and renewed their confidence in standing firm. Tariffs that were meant to corner Canada have united its consumers, its industries, and its leaders. Trump may say he loves tariffs, but the more he leans on them, the more Canada looks outward and discovers new strength. If Washington's disappointment is what fuels Canadian pride, then the balance of advantage in North America is already beginning to tilt in a new direction.
Looking around the world now, you've got China sort of playing by its own playbook economically. You have the U.S. playing by its own playbook, ignoring various agreements, including at times USMCA. What does that mean for the rules-based system for a middle power like Canada?
At the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney delivered a message that left many in Washington unsettled.
And nobody's perfect in this. We have a free trade agreement with the European Union. And we're re-engaging with China and other major economies in terms of developing the rules bilaterally with them.
He announced that Canada would re-engage with China, seeking to establish a new framework for bilateral rules. This declaration landed just as the United States, under President Trump, has extended its reciprocal tariff regime to every major trading partner, including Canada. The tariffs were meant to force others into accepting America's terms. Yet Carney signaled that Canada was ready to chart its own path. Instead of bowing to pressure, Ottawa is turning outward, searching for new alliances and new leverage. The story begins with a clash of visions. Trump builds walls of tariffs. Carney opens doors to alternative partners. That contrast sets the stage for what comes next.
Carney made clear that both Washington and Beijing are playing by their own rulebooks. For Canada, that reality means waiting for others to return to multilateral discipline is no longer an option. Ottawa will now attempt to develop direct rules with China, recognizing the risks but also the opportunities of engaging the world's second-largest economy. Sensitive areas such as national security and data privacy will remain closed. Yet Canada intends to carve out a controlled space for trade and cooperation. This is not surrender, but calculation. With Trump escalating confrontation and tariffs disrupting steel, autos, and farm products, Carney has decided that Canada must place a chip on every table. The re-engagement with China is meant to give Ottawa more balance and more say, even if it means moving in a direction opposite to Washington. This step is designed to give Canada breathing room at a time when U.S. trade actions are tightening around all partners. Carney also reminded his audience that Canada already holds positions in two of the world's largest rules-based systems, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, known as CPTPP, and the Canada-EU Free Trade Agreement. These agreements include standards for labor and sustainability, the kind of provisions that are recognizable and enforceable. By being part of both, Ottawa can serve as a bridge between Europe and Asia. The United States, by contrast, has stepped away. Trump pulled America out of the original TPP and has repeatedly ignored commitments under USMCA. Carney's point was not hidden. Canada is investing in systems where rules matter, while Washington sidelines itself. As those networks expand, America risks becoming the bystander. Ottawa is signaling that its future will not be locked inside Trump's tariff cage. Instead, Canada is building the kind of international bridges that leave Washington outside the room when new rules are written. Carney did not deny Canada's vulnerability. Nearly 80% of Canadian trade still flows south into the United States. But he emphasized the importance of what he called the growth at the margin. New trade with Europe, with CPTPP countries, and with China can shift the balance over time. Even small increases in those directions can change the outlook for industries battered by tariffs. Trump's reciprocal tariffs, meant to squeeze, are creating the incentive for Canada to move elsewhere. The backfire is clear. Instead of reinforcing dependence, the policy has accelerated diversification. Canada is showing that it can step out of America's shadow and place itself in the center of a different global map. The contrast could not be sharper. Trump designed his tariff regime to keep Canada in line, but Carney's new approach flips that logic. By re-engaging with China and doubling down on Europe and Asia, Ottawa is no longer asking Washington for permission. Canada is signaling that it has options and that the United States is not the only game in town. This is the image that left Trump stunned, watching as his neighbor quietly walked out of the cage he built. That is why Carney's words in New York carried such weight. Trump sought to lock Canada in. Ottawa has walked out, leaving the U.S. president stunned as his northern neighbor rewrites the script of survival and influence.